Hello, I'm Guy, and this is Guy Robot. Hello! As you probably know, towards the end of last year I was going to have to move house, and I had a ton of spare computer parts that was on my desk. I've been working through them to do a couple of builds, but I thought I need to do something with these before I move, otherwise I'm just going to have hundreds of pounds of stuff around. So I thought I'm going to try and build a computer of all of the parts I've got spare, but I just needed a case. And what made more sense than to buy the cheapest possible case I could find with LED fans. So I bought this. It's the CiT GeForce ATX gaming tower. Yep, that's right. This is an ATX case with LED fans, 2 on the front, 1 on the back, coloured green, in a high gloss black finish for, I think I paid £22 on Amazon at the time. Available in a selection of colours, never really more than 30 quid though, and I've paid more for an individual fan than a whole case. Difficult to find a cheap ATX case, let alone one with all of that, so I thought, well, let's see what it's like. So I'm going to run through a bit of the build I did, and I'm also going to run through the case. So my first impressions, it's got a picture of a case on. More importantly, yep, that's your instruction manual. Hope you don't need anything more than that. There's a picture of it on the box. I think from this point forward, we don't really need to see that. Taking it out of the box, it is incredibly lightweight. The last few builds I've done have been varying from my Fantex case, which weighs an absolute ton and it was amazing to work on, to some of the others I've done recently being a bit cheaper, but they've all been at least £60 for a case, whereas this was 20 quid with fans. It's lightweight, it feels like it's made of cardboard, but it is really pretty high gloss black. Aesthetically, it looks a bit like it's come from the early 2000s in kind of the angry computer gamer mode, but it's alright. And it's got a weird bulge on one side. More about that later and why it's actually a good thing. Taking it apart, well, the side panels are definitely flimsy. I could probably fan myself with them, but hey, at least they've got thumb screws rather than normal screws. And ooh, there's a Psu Shroud inside. Unfortunately, it's fixed and can't be moved, but more about that later. I/O-wise, the case comes with 2 USB 2 front ports, 2 USB 3 front ports on the top, which I never really like because they look messy when cables there, but hey ho, personal preference. HD audio and a card reader. Not bad. You've now got a card reader and 3 LED fans, all for the price of, well, less than any one of those components. And it also comes with an optional speaker if your motherboard hasn't got one built in, just in case you fancy going back to the early 90s where you need that important BIOS beep from the case speaker. Other than that, what are you going to mount in there? Well, it's got 5¼ inch bays, which apparently you can mount stuff in. I'm not really sure how. One of them's not even exposed with the plastic on the front of it, and the other one doesn't even have a full depth holder for it, so you couldn't really put much other than a fan controller in there. Definitely you're not going to be using a CD-ROM, despite what the box may say otherwise. There are 3 3.5 inch ones. I've not tested those. They sit within the power supply shroud, although trust me, you haven't got room for it if you've got more than a few cables coming out your power supply. And then there are 2 SSD brackets. Brilliant, I was only going to use an SSD. Good news, I only going to use 1 because the second one doesn't actually fit. Yep, that's right, there's kind of holes for 2 and there's supposed to be, but in reality only one of your 2.5 inch drives is going to fit. But hey, if you're spending 25 quid on a case, you probably haven't got many SSDs. The fans, well, they're alright actually, they're pretty quiet. They've certainly scrimped where they can. They've used coloured plastic on the back, translucent on the front where you can't really see it. I don't really mind that. It doesn't have a fan controller with the case, but it does have multiple levels of illumination. You can control front and rear separately with low, high or off as the light levels. And well, they're alright. They look a bit flickery when they're turned on, but it's not actually the LEDs, it's just the combination of the rotation of the LEDs hasn't been terribly well thought through, but it's okay. Oh, well, that all sounds good. What about the build? First of all, what was I building? So all the leftover parts I had were from various servers and workstations and projects in the past. So it was quite an interesting build. I had an Asus KCMA D8 AMD Opteron, dual Opteron workstation board. I paired that with 2 Opteron 4334 processors for a total of 12 cores, I think about 3.5 gigahertz. And that was with the Noctua U12DO coolers. Big beasts of things. normally come with 2 fans on each side of them for kind of push-pull through it. So these are huge when they've got everything mounted on it and incredibly deep. 32 gig of ECC RAM. I stuck in there a whole bunch of other random cards I had, so I put in 2 quad gigabit Intel network cards for 8 ports on top of the 2 integrated Intel ports that are in there. I put in a PCI, not PCI, a PCI VOIP card for an FXO and an FXS port. Probably never going to use that, but hey ho, it might as well sit in a computer, and if I run a VOIP server, I've got that available then. A GTX 460 for the graphics, which is incredibly power hungry, but it's got an orange fan on it. And on top of that, I also had a built-in integrated lights out management card, so I can manage the whole thing remotely via an extra network port. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. And and an SSD, although the SSD is only like 30-40 gig or something. It's a cheap Intel one I got ages ago. My plan for the machine was just to have another VM host, but then my wife's main computer blew up. So halfway through this build, it kind of changed from being a generic VM host into being also my wife's main computer, where I was going to do a pass-through graphics card from one of the VMs for that. Separate video on that coming up though. And finally, power supply. Well, I started with the world's cheapest power supply, which was £10 for a like 350 watt power supply. There was no way the cable was going to reach on that. So after the new year, I saw a really cheap offer on an EVGA, like 700 watt power supply that somebody had got as a return. It was like £200 down to 50 quid. So fully modular. So I got that and stuck that in there as well. Right, the build. Well, first impressions, I cut myself straight away. Turns out not faulted steel and very sharp. But that's okay because that was immediately followed by a static shock, which made me completely forget about the amount of cuts that I'd got. Quite a powerful one as well. Trying to mount stuff in there, well, it becomes very clear very quickly there isn't much room in this case. It is rated for an ATX board, but yeah, you're not going to have much room working with an ATX. You can get it all in there, but you're not going to enjoy it. I had to remove one of the fans from one of the coolers because there just physically wasn't room with the case fan as well. And hey, I'd paid 20 quid for the case. I wanted to show off my case fan. Forget the £90 cooling fan. The motherboard screws were nigh on impossible to actually screw the board in with the cooling fans on top, but also I couldn't really mount the cooling fans without them being in top because, funnily enough, it's not designed for dual CPU Opterons. So I've ended up with, of like 9 screws, only having 7 of them in. Trying to actually wire the motherboard power in, I wish I had done this earlier. Instead, I had to use like pencils and stuff to try and prod it in down the side and cut my hand to shred because there just isn't room working around it. And the rear fan, the power cable for that, kept getting caught in the I/O shield. In the end, I gave in, I just let it get caught. In fact, I've lost a USB port because it's power covered by it. There just wasn't enough room when working with all of this. The I/O shield itself didn't actually stay in. I think it's held in by hope alone and a bit of pressure from the cable. So hey, maybe that's intended design. Not great. The biggest problem though is, well, there's no room to work on it, and that is made so much worse by the cable management in this thing. So the Psu Shroud looks nice. It's welded in place, it's not removable. Bit annoying. But there's no holes coming out the top of it, and there's no holes coming out the kind of left motherboard side of it. So everything has to route round the other side of the case and come back through. The problem with that is that not a single power supply I had, or even the EVGA modular one, the cables weren't long enough to reach the ATX socket on the motherboard. Never really had that problem before, so I had to get my modular power supply and an extender just to route the cable in such a way to get there. And then there's only really one hole everything fits through, so it just looks a mess. Just an extra hole drilled in the top would have made all the difference on that power supply shroud to have had more flexibility in routing it. The side bulge, which looks really ugly to start with, makes sense when you finish building this because you're going to have so many cables on the right hand side that you need that bulge to shut it. There is no cable management room apart from that bulge. So if you can kind of push the cables around a bit and shove some in the bottom, then that bulge gives you just enough ability to shut it. It would have also been easier if the top of the case had been remotely removable. Again, welded on, not going to happen. So you want to do building on this case, you just have the left side to work with. So when you're working at the top of the motherboard, it was really difficult to try and reach some of the areas on there, not being able to get into it, particularly because the location of the coolers and the size of the coolers on mine, and 2 of them just blocked all access for it. Well, Suffice to say, it wasn't the most amazing case I've worked on. It did fit. It's built. You know, it actually works. But it wasn't enjoyable to work on. It was like going back in time 20 years. That being said, it was, depending on where you're buying it from and what day of the week you're on, dodgy Chinese case, it's between 20 and 30 pounds for a full ATX case with 3 fans, LED fans that are reasonably quiet, room for an ATX board, and a memory card reader, as well as USB 3, USB 2, and HD audio. You're not going to get that for 20 quid anywhere else. Is it great to work with? No. Does it look all right? Yeah. Is it functional? Yeah. So, the reality is I've been spoiled with the case I've got. If you're in a pinch and you want actually a reasonable case for an ATX board, it's probably fine. If you are considering putting an ATX board in this, really think again. There are millimetres of clearance on it, and depending on your individual case, you may or may not have it fit. The Noctua fans that I've got, the heat sinks have less than 1 millimetre of clearance at the top. I suspected it would be close, but it was really close. So, all in all, it's built, and the case is all right. I wouldn't recommend it for a server build, but it's okay for a cheap gaming build. So if you are looking for a cheap reusable case, it probably works for you. The main thing though, what am I doing with this build? A couple of videos are going to be coming up on this. I've been, looking for a replacement computer for my wife. So while we get her iMac fixed, she wants something in the interim. So I've been looking at, can I run a virtual Hackintosh on it using ESXi and macOS running inside it, so she can have a macOS Hackintosh that's virtualized with a real video mouse and keyboard so she can still play games. That's proving a little bit tricky to get working with the Opteron CPUs, unfortunately. But I'm definitely going to have a video coming up on non-pass-through GPU Hackintosh, and I'm also going to have a video on how to do pass-through GPU to get a full gaming workstation set up within this. So I've actually done, since I've done this build, I've also swapped out one of the LAN cards for a 7-port PCIe USB 3 hub, which means that can be passed through as well, and then it's a complete workstation sat there for my wife with 8 CPU cores while I'm still running a whole bunch of virtual machines on it. Win-win. Video on that will be up in a couple of weeks' time. But for now, I thought I'd just give this quick update on what I've been doing, show this build, and give a general review of this case. All in all, CiT, GeForce, £20 case, you get what you pay for, and that's as much as I'm going to draw from that conclusion. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please thumbs up and like it. If you didn't, dislike, let me know what you'd rather see instead. Don't forget to leave comments below and let me know what you're interested in. The next video I've got coming up is going back to some open source stuff. I'm going to be doing a run through of how I got X up and running on my Gen 2 box when I got it, and also do a quick run through of what my desktop looks like and what my day-to-day workload looks like on my Linux desktop when I've got there. So it will kind of be a how to get X set up and then kind of see, well, what does my desktop running X actually look like for me? That will hopefully be coming up next week. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.